Hello Gemini, and welcome to your year 2023 Astrology and Horoscope Deep Dive Forecast. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to outline to you first how I'm going to structure this video. Of course, the new year begins on the 1st of January and is 52 weeks, but the Western tropical zodiac begins with the spring equinox on the 20th of March in 2023, and that divides those 52 weeks into 4 quadrant quarters of 13 weeks. So I'm going to give you an overview of what each of those quarters mean for you. But the first one is not in year 2023, it's right at the end of 2022 with the winter solstice of the 21st of December, because that provides the influence for the first around about 12 weeks of 2023. Now there's going to be some big changes this year in terms of planets. Saturn into Pisces, Pluto into Aquarius, Jupiter into your 12th house, Taurus, where it's going to be for over a year. The North Node reversing on the 12th of July into your sector of friendship and group connection. Also, we have a solar eclipse in that location, but the second solar eclipse in the autumn is in your sector of personal self-expression. Both of those can be very powerful for you. We also need to understand what the impact was of the lunar eclipse that occurred in a very psychological location for you, the total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November 22, because that provides a backdrop for the first 4 months of this new year. And of course your ruler is Mercury, so it's critical that we understand the influence of Mercury through 23, and it begins in retrograde, but it also begins in an earth sign. Its second retrograde in an earth sign of Taurus, its third earth sign Virgo, its fourth earth sign Capricorn, gets back to where it began, but then it retreats for the last few days of the year in your fellow mutable sign of Sagittarius, but of course your opposite sign where Mercury is actually detrimented, and that just brings the year to a close. So we need to understand what that journey's about, because for you, those Mercury retrogrades, with the exception of Sagittarius, are all in watery locations in terms of the houses. House 8, House 12, House 4, House 8. So a lot of emotion around your communication is possible this year, or a lot of time spent understanding what really makes you tick. Now, of course, the solar return at the start of the year is critical because that provides a backdrop for the whole year. So I will be describing that as well. Checking out your new moon, which occurs on June the 18th, and it is squaring Neptune, which can be tricky. But there is also a very powerful new moon in your opposite sign of December the 12th, which is going to be critical as far as your relationships. So that's how I'm going to approach things. I will be going through each important event of the year one by one. I'll also have graphics coming up on the screen to help you to follow the story as it unfolds. Now, if you would like to get your year 2023 personal horoscope forecast based on your birth data of time, date and place of birth, if you share that with me, I can give you a roadmap that you can use for the rest of your life, plus that forecast for 23, plus if you order in 22, I'll give you the rest of 22 free, and you can get 30% off. Please see the link below. Finally, if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you've already done so, thank you so much for your ongoing support. So first up, Gemini, let's just explore what that total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November meant, because The moon and Uranus were combining in your 12th house, which can be a very delicate area. Something may have come to the surface at that point and may be continuing to do so. And there may be a need to balance your emotional, psychological and spiritual well-being with your more physical and practical health. And because Saturn, the planet of restriction, was T-square in both the locations, it may feel quite daunting. But the 9th house, where Saturn is very much about the truth, the higher truth. So even if there are some uncomfortable things that you're grappling with, or you've been refining some of your health approaches, I think essentially it can be a very positive process, even if the change is feeling a little bit delicate. Now that final winter solstice, Cardinal Quadrant 4, which occurred on the 21st of December, provides the influence for the first 12 weeks of this new year. And the interesting thing about it was that the midpoint between the sun and the moon was in your opposite sign. So relationships are going to be very important as you come in to 23, but that midpoint is in a square with Neptune. So relationships at work particularly will need some care. Also, because Neptune has been in your 10th house since 2012, your compassion and your kindness and perhaps your spiritual values have been very important in your work. If you do work as a psychic, as a carer, as a healer, if you work in some kind of environment which requires a degree of sacrifice, that's all wonderful, but it's also important to protect yourself. So the midpoint in Sagittarius is just making you mindful of setting your boundaries, and that can be hard to do with Neptune. Also, Mars in your sign in retrograde is face to face with the moon in the sign of Sagittarius. When the moon and Mars are in an opposition, it can create very polarized energy and very quick energy. And because for you this goes across house 1 and 7, it may lead to some quite intense and not necessarily long lasting, but quite fast moving, intense connections with others, but potentially also some disagreements. Now also on that cardinal quadrant, the sun at 0 degrees Capricorn, for you the 8th house, very much to do with deep transformations, that's actually squaring up with Jupiter, the planet of growth and optimism, which for you is in the 11th house at the start of this year. It's very much to do with the group collective. Now 11th, 8th can actually, with the Sun and Jupiter, be very generous. But it's also important if you do feel that your group associations are invading your need for privacy, that you again work on setting those boundaries. Now the solar return at the turn of the year is critically important. And the aspect that I really like the most is, despite the fact that Mars is in a retrograde in your sign and is going to be with you through to the 25th of March, so that's terrific, it's going to give you a lot of thrust, it is forging a great link with Jupiter. So Mars and Jupiter together is a very galvanizing energy. It's very much about enthusiasm, passion, and because for you, Mars in your sign is asking you to be individual, but Jupiter in your 11th house can see you still collaborate with people who recognize your need to be yourself, but still want to be part of any kind of cooperative effort with you. So a very exciting influence that you can use to your advantage all through the year. But Mercury is retrograde, your ruler, at the start of this year in the 8th house. Now, in a prosaic way, that can be about managing finance, especially shared assets and things like who you bank with, but anything to do with mortgages. So those are going to require a great deal of precision this year. But the 8th house can also be deeply emotional. This is very Scorpionic. So your ability to think deeply, but perhaps see you a bit more introspective, is definitely going to be part of this year's story. Venus, however, the planet of love and affection, but also the planet of loot, is in a conjunction with Pluto, the planet of change, but also of power. If you do want a romantic relationship to come into your world this year, if it does happen, it's likely to be very intense, but also can see huge amounts of intimacy. Now that may be something that sounds extremely appealing. Just be aware, however, that when Pluto is involved with Venus, some kind of leverage can be at work. So relationships generally, whether they are in business or for pleasure, can be very productive this year, but just be conscious of the politics. Now also, the midpoint at the turn of the year is in the sign of Pisces, just under 7 degrees, and that is going to be squaring up Mars in your sign. So however much you want to make progress this year, you have to pace yourself, because Mars could see you in that square a little bit impatient to make the progress towards the goals that you want to achieve. So as we make our way into the new year, Gemini, on January the 12th, Mars goes direct in your sign. And through to the 25th of March, you really can focus on your individual hopes. Mars is asking us to focus on our personal self-expression. It can be about instant gratification, and of course it can be impatient. But things can move forwards, and remember, you're supported by that terrific angle to Jupiter at the turn of the year. Your ruler, Mercury, also ends its retrograde on the 18th of January. Now, in my more detailed monthly and weekly forecast, I obviously do talk about things like the shadow periods. But here on the January the 18th, if you've been waiting to hear about some finance news, some kind of letter to do with raising money for a business venture, or just hearing about some kind of legacy payment, you could hear good news at this point. On January the 21st, we have an Aquarius new moon. Really significant for you because this is your 9th house. So this could give you the spur to travel and to break out, be more spontaneous. You have those instincts within you very strongly anyway, but it is the case that on this event, Venus is checked by Saturn. The truth of one relationship could become really clear in the following 4 weeks because of that. January the 22nd, however, sees Uranus end its retrograde in your 12th house. If your nervous system has been feeling the strain, it wouldn't be an entire surprise. All we can do with Uranus is keep embracing its truth. The truth in the 12th house is often to do with the shadow side of our nature that we're not always totally conscious of. So it's a journey to become more aware of the things that really motivate us at a deeper level. And I think Uranus going direct will generally be helpful. February the 20th, however, sees the new moon in the sign of Pisces, very much to do with your connection to the wider world, but it is in a conjunction with Saturn. Now this is a disassociate conjunction because Saturn is just still in the sign of Aquarius, and it's giving you a little bit of a flavour, this new moon. It could see you really getting some clear plans together in terms of wanting to move forwards towards some key goals and ambitions. Now on March the 7th, Saturn arrives in the sign of Pisces, and it is going to be there through to the 25th of May 2025. If you're serious about making progress and you want greater recognition, you want to raise your profile, Saturn will reward you during the next 2.5 years, but perspiration and application will be just as important as talent. So talent alone won't see you through to where you want to go. So that's the test that Saturn is setting for you. But Saturn can reward us if we show the devotion. March the 14th sees Mars in your sign reach an exact right angle with Neptune. Now this is the third of these exact squares. 2 occurred in 2022. This could take a little bit of your vibrancy away. It could dissipate some of your energy. You may find yourself distracted. Concentration could be harder. Perhaps there's some politics doing the rounds that can also be off-putting. Try to keep your focus at that time. Now, March the 20th sees the spring equinox and the beginning of the Western tropical calendar. And for you, the interesting thing is the midpoint on that event is at 24 degrees in Pisces and therefore conjunct Neptune, and they're both within the square within 3 degrees of Mars. So again, the potential over the next 13 weeks to really be a little bit distracted by some uncertainties that are going on around your professional or worldly interaction. But certainly the sun moving into the sign of Aries, as it does at that point, helps you to connect with others, to network. And that's going to be a critical part of this year's story for you. Now, March the 21st, we do see that Aries new moon, and it is going to be squaring your ruler Mars. And the reason for this is that Mars at this point is 27 degrees in Gemini, so it's a disassociate square, but it is a square. So your desire to manifest your longer term plans, the 11th house of Aries, needs to take into account that Mars for you nearly in your second house, that you've got the resources and the foundation in place to push forwards with the speed and conviction that you require. Having said that, Mars in your sign does, ironically, forge a very positive link with the newly arrived Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Now, March the 23rd sees Pluto make its brief sojourn into the sign of Aquarius, which for you is house 9. I think you're going to go through to June the 11th when it reverses back into the sign of Capricorn, a period where your desire to manifest your philosophies is going to take on a much greater power, particularly if you're born right at the start of the sign of Gemini. Don't be surprised if you travel through this period as well. April the 20th and 21st, depending on where you live in the world, sees a wonderful solar eclipse in the sign of Aries. Very much about initiation, but for you, the collective, the 11th house, your friendships, how you network, the higher values you have. And because it combines with Jupiter, the planet of fortune, this can be a galvanizing solar eclipse. Your desire to make progress is also going to be strengthened by the fact that Pluto, just in Aquarius, forges a disassociate right angle to this eclipse. Now for you, that's across the 8th, 9th houses, essentially. So if you want to improve your financial circumstances, who you know may be just as important as what you know. But when Jupiter and Pluto are in a square, it can see us take shortcuts. Our desire for power and success, or to impose our philosophies on somebody else, can be very strong. So this is an eclipse that will need some care. Now on May the 1st, Mercury goes into the second of its retrogrades in your 12th house. This could see you doing some soul searching, and maybe something can slow down that's important to you. It may feel that you are detached from others, that people are not as much or as infrequently connecting with you. But on May the 5th or 6th, depending on where you are, we get the mirror reflected lunar eclipse of the one that occurred on the 8th of November last year. So this one occurs in Scorpio, which for you is very much about practicalities, health, fitness, diet, organisation, but it's opposite the moon and also Uranus again in your 12th house. So you get a little bit of a reminder that it's important to balance those two areas of your life, the more physical and the more spiritual. So keeping it holistic is really the theme. May the 15th, however, sees Mercury go direct. May the 16th, Jupiter moves into your 12th house and is going to be there for over a year. Now, Jupiter governs the sign of Sagittarius, which is kind of what people think Jupiter is about. It's about expansion, optimism, happy-go-lucky, travel, can be to do with higher philosophies, but it also traditionally rules the sign of Pisces. And for you, that more Piscean type energy is really going to come to the fore with this Jupiter transit over the following 12 months and 9 days. So don't be surprised if your desire to embrace a higher form of or more divine way of existing, the turbulence that this life throws up, that really isn't going to be a surprise if you become much more informed and much more aware of the spiritual dimension. May the 17th can be very fortunate for you right through to the 16th of June, because the retreating North Node combines within 3 degrees Jupiter, but they become exactly conjunct on the 1st of June. So maybe someone's going to surprise you with their appreciation of a past generous deed you did or a gift. Somehow or another you're going to get some kind of evidence or some kind of acknowledgement of the part of your nature that's less tangible, but where other people feel you've gone that extra mile to help them. Also on May the 19th, we have the Taurus new moon. Again, the 12th house for you, but this is actually forging a really good sextile in Mars, which is moved from your sign into the sign of Cancer. So there could be something that you discover in your home over the next 4 weeks, maybe through decluttering, selling stuff off. Maybe it's going to be some kind of emotional or spiritual insight that's going to be revealed. But you could also find that something deep within you connected to your past, an old skill, experience, knowledge, or even association can suddenly come back to you in a way which helps to improve your financial situation. May the 20th sees Mars move into your 3rd house. Now this is terrific for you because the 3rd house, very much in keeping with your sign, but Mars in Leo just loves to shine. It's very charismatic here. This is giving you a lot of encouragement to share your ideas. If you want to, teach or train, this is a wonderful opportunity. If you're involved with technology, you can also really be the star of the show. But if you have things you want to express, say through a book or a journal or through a blog, a wonderful opportunity for you with Mars moving into Leo. You may even find yourself wanting to get a bit more physically active. Now on May the 21st, Mars does go into a powerful opposition with Pluto. If you're traveling somewhere, don't be in too much of a rush. If you're talking to someone about a point of principle, there could be quite a standoff between you and they. But equally, if you want to get fitter, there's going to be no limitation to your desire to push yourself to the nth degree to really get that much more toned up. So by June the 1st, we have the high point of that Jupiter North Node conjunction. Really, really lovely. And on June the 6th, Venus joins up with Mars in the sign of Leo. But this is one of the standout features of this year because Venus is going to be in this location for 4.5 months. Now for sure, it is going to be going retrograde for 6 weeks. But often you're a very skilled communicator, but your words, even your ideas, take on an extra sheen and a radiance that others can find really captivating. And it could also see you flirting for fun with somebody, perhaps through the internet, perhaps on an app, perhaps it's going to be someone in your locality. If you do want to forge better relationships in your community, Mars and Venus being in Leo together will certainly help. Your ideas generally can gain much greater currency. People can look up to you even more during this period. On June the 11th, however, Pluto retreats back into Capricorn. So really through to early January next year, it's back to that very deep and at times very painful transitions about understanding the deeper machinations that are working right at the root of our being. The 8th house can be where things die off, but where things are renewed. So something important and profound is possible between now and also early January. On June the 17th, Saturn, however, goes into retrograde. So that thrust for greater recognition could seem to slow down, become more frustrating through to the 4th of November. June the 18th, however, sees the Gemini new moon in your sign, but it is squaring up with Neptune. So your desire to be an individual may not mesh particularly neatly with what's expected of you in a more structured environment. So if you work in a big business or organization, the more creative and spiritual energy of Neptune and its angle to the moon and the sun in your sign means your individuality could make you feel a bit uncertain whether you're going to be appreciated in the way you want. So if you're someone who really wants to be successful but you're a natural bohemian, this is a wonderful opportunity to give yourself a really outlandish makeover, pack in the day job and follow something that really meets your passions. So June the 21st sees the summer solstice and the beginning of Cardinal Quadrant 2 for this year, and the 13-week period thereafter. And it's going to be blessed with the potential for you to really charm people with great effect, with Venus and Mars pretty close together in the sign of Leo. Also, Jupiter in Taurus is actually forging a very good link with Saturn in your 10th house. The things you're doing behind the scenes, the research, the soundings, can pay off because those in the know are starting to see you as being a person of greater substance. July the 12th, the North Node reverses back into your sector of sociability and friendship for the first time in 18 and a half years. Think back to then, 18 and a half years ago. Think what you were doing then, and you'll get a little bit of a flavour of what you can expect right through till the 29th of January 2025. July the 17th sees the Cancer new moon, also in a sextile to Uranus. So for you, Cancer is about your resources, your self-worth, your foundations, the second house. And I think Uranus here is saying, keep being ingenious about what you're doing behind the scenes. It can affect your earnings positively. July the 23rd, however, sees Venus slam on the brakes, and it will be in retrograde through to the 3rd of September. It's going to be important with that Venus and Mars conjunction and transit to be utterly sincere in what you say. Now, we're all faced with situations at times where we may choose to be slightly economical with what we say because we don't want to offend the other person. But Venus can be a slightly superficial influence through its rulership of the sign of Libra. So keeping it real, mean what you say what you mean, will help you to work through Venus's retrograde. But greater care is needed around the expression of your affection or your interactions with neighbours, siblings or people in your community. August the 1st, however, sees a full moon in the sign of Aquarius. If you are thinking of travelling anywhere, the next 2 weeks suggest some care is required. Also, Mercury, your ruler, is in opposition with Saturn on that event. So that's a real toughie because Saturn can be very limiting to your thinking. You may find that work and home get you down a little bit at that time, which may push you to embrace the Aquarius new moon to have some escapism or change. And in fact, if you did that, I think that would be a very good thing to do. Ironically, Mars, now in Virgo, where it needs to be more sacrificing, but your 4th house, is actually forging a very positive angle to Jupiter, a repetition of what we had at the start of the year. But they were better located for you at the start of the year because they were more outgoing in your sign in the case of Mars, Jupiter in Aries. This is more about the more practical dimension of your situation. Keep chipping away behind the scenes. Jupiter's going to help you to do that. However, there is a stunning Leo new moon on August the 16th. And if you need to, absolutely spellbind people with the power of your personality, the following 4 weeks gives you a great opportunity to do so. August the 23rd, however, does see your ruler go into retrograde again. So anything to do with buying and selling houses, having people to come around and perhaps do some work, contractors, family issues, can get a bit muddled and bogged down from then until the 15th of September. August the 27th, however, sees Mars move into your sister air sign of Libra. Now, technically, Mars not at its best in Libra, but for you, this gives you added sex appeal and self-confidence, so strut your stuff. August the 29th sees the second retrograde with Uranus this year, which will last through to the following year. And of course, it is in your 12th house. Uranus is about truth, freedom, independence, innovation, but it can also be about rebelliousness. If you're still not feeling that the more psychological side of your situation is as you would like, greater reflection may be required during this retrograde. August the 31st, however, does see a tough full moon in the sign of Pisces, which for you, of course, is how you're trying to manifest your talent with the wider world, but it is in a conjunction with Saturn. So balancing work and life may prove to be a bit tough in the following 2 weeks. However, on September the 3rd, Venus goes direct in Leo. So maybe if there have been some misunderstandings, they can be ironed out at that point. However, September the 4th, Jupiter puts on the brakes and goes into retrograde, whence it will be really to the end of the year, the 30th of December. Jupiter is really encouraging you to embrace that shadow side of your nature that Uranus has perhaps been waking up in quite a dramatic and startling and perhaps unsettling way since March the 7th, 2019, and for those 5 months of 2018 when it went through Taurus briefly before going back into Aries. But what Jupiter can do is take the disruption and make sense of it. So the Jupiter retrograde through to the end of the year just suggests you may need to withdraw a little bit and keep refining your philosophies. However, September the 15th sees the Virgo new moon. If you are wanting to change where you live or think again about who you live with or how you live there, a great opportunity, because this new moon also links to Taurus, so those inner resources are once more going to come through for you. Mercury also goes direct on September the 15th, always something to celebrate. September the 23rd, we have the autumnal equinox, and therefore Cardinal Quadrant 3 for this new astrological year. And the interesting thing for you is the midpoint is at 18 degrees in Scorpio, and it's opposite Jupiter. So if you do need to put a little bit more effort and energy into getting physically fitter, I think Jupiter is going to be helping you to research your options, give you different ideas how to do so. However, the Sun is at that point in a quincunx with Saturn. Just be aware that your personal expression, the Sun in Libra, house 5, and of course you have Mars here at this time, could be checked by needing to fit into a structure, Saturn in the 10th house, which doesn't quite work with your individuality. Now, because you're very much someone who can flex and be very skilled at getting on with lots of different types of people, you may find a way around this with aplomb. But just be aware, again, if you want to be truer to your own individual spirit, it may mean that you need to break away from a more formal business or working environment. October the 12th sees Mars power its way into your 6th house. Brilliant for your physical vitality, to be honest. October the 14th, the Libra solar eclipse. I really love this for you because it's conjunct your ruler. It's in your 5th house of personal expression, but it's also opposite the North Node. those connections that the solar eclipse and the North Node moving into your 11th house on the 12th of July have been encouraging, get another further boost, vibrant boost in the back quarter of this year. So that's a really good one for you to enjoy. However, October the 28th does see a lunar eclipse in Taurus in your 12th house, and that's opposite the Sun in Scorpio. So again, balancing those two areas to ensure that your existence is as holistic as possible. But this time, fortunately, Saturn actually supports both the influences. So whereas last year on November the 8th, that was such a disruptive total lunar eclipse for you, I think this one can actually be quite healing. You will be able to see the progress that you have made. November the 1st helps you in that process because there's a Scorpio new moon. If you need to reorganize, reschedule, prioritize, discriminate about what's really important for you, the depth of Scorpio and the more structural energies of the 6th house can see you do so skillfully. And once more, Saturn's very helpful. For some people, that could be an application for a new job, and I think success is possible. Saturn also goes direct on the 4th of November, a sigh of relief, particularly if you do work in that bigger organisation. The demands that have been building up can ease somewhat. November the 24th sees Mars move into your opposite sign. I love this. This sees you set your boundaries, be more authoritative and assertive, but also competitive. But also, if you want to bring some drama into your love life, that and the combination on December the 12th between the new moon in your opposite sign and Mars could see you much more risk-taking in terms of pushing outside your comfort zone to try to connect to someone you're really attracted to. But on December the 13th, Mercury goes into the 4th of its retrogrades, this time again in your 8th house of deep transitions, and of course in a more practical way about longer term money. And on December the 22nd, so one day forwards in the second of these two winter solstices on 2023, we do have the 4th of the cardinal quadrants. So this will just bring your year to an end. But the good news is that Mercury, despite its retrograde, is actually forging a very positive angle with Saturn, and also, along with the Sun, a very positive angle to the Moon and Jupiter in your 12th house. I think you're going to end this year with a sense of greater peacefulness. Mercury may, as it moves on the 23rd into Sagittarius, still see some last minute cross wires. Perhaps it's going to be about the Christmas arrangements. But Jupiter going direct on the 30th of December, I feel that you will reflect on 2023 and see that you've actually taken some huge steps forwards, because being an air sign, and of course I'm an air sign, and my draconic sun is in Gemini as well as Mercury, and I also have Mercury in my natal chart in the 3rd house along with the Sun, so a very Gemini type person. The thing with Gemini, air sign, 3rd house energy is it is very mercurial, it's very quick-witted, it likes to flex and pivot, it needs massive amounts of stimulation. The difficulty is that Uranus overstimulates the adrenal gland. So if we don't embrace that 12th house energy, it continues to have quite a disruptive effect. And of course, the energy in the sign of Capricorn, which started the year, is very much to do with transitions, about where you can be most devoted, how you can earn money. Yes, Saturn moving into the 10th house speaks of greater responsibility if you're prepared to work at it, but also, of course, potential limitation. And so obligations to others, such as elderly parents, may become more of a thing. And Neptune's already there. And then we've got all those midpoints in Pisces this year, which mean that your role in life is definitely going to be something you're working at. And then Jupiter moving into your 12th house can soothe off the more jagged edges of Uranus and help you to expand your knowledge and understanding to a huge degree. Then the solar eclipse in Aries, the North Node in Aries, can see you connecting to others in a much easier way than 2022. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay safe and goodbye for now.